Good morning, everyone, and thank you, those of you who are here already early in the morning on Sunday. And I know there was a lot of difficulty getting here because I had a hard problem getting here with the traffic. Um, some of the streets are closed off on South of Market. But anyway, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to see you all here. This is a forum. My name is Bruce Newberger. I'm one of the members of the Human Rights Working Group, which runs Forum here at UUSF. Human Rights Working Group is led by Dolores Halbrin and Jeff Peckrell and Melvin Starks, who's on a trip south right now. I'm taking Jeff Peckrell's place as host on the forum today, and Jeff will be back in 2 weeks. He's at a trip to India. I'd like to thank those who make the forum possible, including Jonathan Silk, who's our hero, and our communications manager, Dolores, and David Halbrand, who are preparing the breakfast today. And we welcome new forum member, Adam Verokwa, who will do the Ohlone recognition. I'm really happy to have Adam with us today. It's sort of his debut here at the forum. So I'm going to ask Adam to come up now.
Thank you, Bruce, and good morning, everyone. We, the members of the First Unitarian Universalist Society of San Francisco, acknowledge the Ramaytush Ohlone people, who are the ancestral custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, past, present, and future, who call this place, the land that our society rests upon, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We recognize that as the original stewards of this land, the Ohlone and other indigenous peoples have understood the interconnectedness of all life and maintained harmony with all of nature for millennia. We honor and thank them now for their enduring commitment to our Mother Earth. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. And we're so fortunate to have Paul Larudee here. And I've, as our speaker this morning, and I've heard a lot about Paul over the years, but have never had a chance to hear him in person. So I'm anxiously awaiting that as well, as I think those of you here and those on Zoom also. So here we're going to have Karen Magoon is going to come up and introduce Paul. Okay, Karen.
Paul Larudee I've known for some time, and he has been introduced to Forum, but years ago, it's amazing how the years go so quickly. I find it particularly interesting about Paul, besides his being my friend, is that he spent many years in Arab countries and I'm looking for, anyway, doesn't matter. He was a former Ford Foundation project supervisor, Fulbright-Hays lecturer in Lebanon, and U.S. government advisor to Saudi Arabia. He's been on the faculty of San Francisco State University, the University of San Francisco, St. Mary's College in Moraga, and Haigazian College in Beirut. He was with the International Solidarity Movement in Palestine and co-founder of the movement to break the Israeli naval siege of Gaza. So I'm going to divert from that a bit to remind everybody that Paul worked on the whole idea of getting ships to Gaza from 2006 to 2008 was when you've had those first ships, and they were successful. They were able to get kids in Gaza who were amputees to Cyprus for limbs, for treatment. It was amazing. And it wasn't until the end of that period that there was finally an attack by Israel. And we all remember 2010 as being the Mavi Marmaris, a terrible attack that killed 9 people from boats that were actually husbanded by Turkey. And Paul was on one of those boats, and he was fortunately not killed. He's with us today. But he was, as I understand, arrested and released, but maybe he can tell you more. I want to make sure that I don't tell any of this wrong. But anyway, I am delighted to introduce Paul, who has moved on. He even said to me, the fleet was important for a time, but it's that day is gone. We don't have that opportunity anymore. And he is moving on to his idea of prospects for the continuation of life on Earth and the of the human species itself. And so he has many, many ideas that we've been throwing back and forth this morning and for the last year. But he's writing a book on this, and I would like to bring one of the great minds of this generation to the fore, and that would be Paul Larudee.
Testing. Okay. Thank you so much, Karen. That's quite an introduction. More than I was expecting. I think I'm going to have to lift this up to read it, or else read it off my phone. Anyway, this is a departure for me. I speak extemporaneously. I don't read it, but in this case, I have so much to say that I condensed it into writing and I published it. And therefore, it might sound a bit dry, but at the end, it won't be dry. So please save your questions, and I'll try to get through it as quickly as possible without going too fast. And also, I will try to summarize certain parts of it in order to make it shorter. But anyway, so yes, prospects for the continuation of life on Earth and of the human species. So last year, the journal Nature published an article written by 19 people, co-authors. It was called The Nature of the Last Universal Common Ancestor and Its Impact on the Early Earth System. It describes the current status of research onto the origin of life on Earth and the latest available evidence based upon DNA data, the fossil record, and isotope tracing. It demonstrates the remarkable, even astonishing accomplishments of scientific inquiry into the origins of life. The evidence in the article points to what they call a last universal common ancestor. The acronym is LUCA. And I would call it the first universal, because what they have found is that they can trace our ancestry back to 4.2 billion years ago. And at that time, our ancestor, the common ancestor of all life on Earth, is a prokaryote grade anaerobic acetogen. In other words, a very simple single-celled organism, neither male nor female, and not requiring oxygen to survive. It procreates simply by creating copies of itself. And these cells exist today. We all have lots of them in our bodies. And as amazing as that is, let's look at what it does not say. First, it does not say that other life forms did not precede LUCA. In fact, it's assumed that they did, more primitive life forms, but we don't have any traces of them. Second, LUCA is not presumed to have been the only life form at the time, but rather the only one that survived and evolved into all earthly life forms that exist today. To put it into perspective, let's remember that our entire pre-human population of 900,000 years ago fell to only 1,280 individuals on Earth and remained that size for 117,000 years before starting to increase again. We almost disappeared. Furthermore, today, the entire human race can trace its ancestry to a single woman who existed around 200,000 years ago. Every human being alive today shares her DNA. Both of these examples illustrate the fact that not all branches of a family tree ultimately bear fruit, so that even if the family is large, many individual members will themselves have no descendants. The continuation of my line, for example, depends entirely on my two grandsons who may or may not have children. That's not unusual. Every family can ultimately trace its line to a single ancestor. In the case of Luca, therefore, the common ancestor of all life on Earth is simply the one that survived. Others surely existed, but left no offspring that exist today. Obviously, Luca did not remain unchanged. I mean, I can just look at you and see that you're not single-cell organisms. And it changed. How did it change? It changed through processes first described by Charles Darwin. In fact, the Nature article sets forth, let's see, it involved all of the, okay. These laws have been described by many naturalists and biologists, and the most famous of these laws with respect to evolution is the law of natural selection, first articulated by Charles Darwin in his book, The Origin of Species. And with some editing on my part to allow for the more recent discovery of DNA and its role in what Darwin called heredity, it can be stated as follows. So I'm going to call this evolutionary law number one. Natural selection is the process by which an individual member of a species passes along traits encoded in its DNA to its offspring. To the extent that these traits contribute to the survival of the offspring, they propagate themselves and therefore the species. I'm going to talk about evolution a lot because it has a lot to do with the conclusion that I draw. So, natural selection operates over generations to select for the traits that help a species to survive and to select out the traits that do not. This is often called survival of the fittest, with that being a relative term depending on changes in the environment in which the species lives. In some cases, the entire species dies out, which we call extinction. When, for example, a change in habitat is too great or too abrupt for natural selection to save the species. Some extinct species are the trilobite, the Irish elk, the Hawaii chaff flower, and many more. In other cases, if they didn't go extinct, the species might evolve into more than one species. When populations of a species are isolated from each other for a long time in habitats that alter them in different ways. A common example is the donkey or burro and the horse. They're different species, but they evolved from the same species. The factors that play in evolution and extinction, some examples, you can probably guess them, are climate change, cataclysmic events, loss of habitat, invasive competing species, loss of food source, physical isolation of a species or a population within the species, and some traits by which species propagate themselves in order to adapt to these changes are strength, speed, rapid maturation, defensive mechanisms, access to prey or nourishment, aerial flight, developing wings, prolific distribution of seed or offspring, ability to store nutrients, as the squirrels do, access to sexual propagation, ability to survive hardship and deprivation, all, things we could probably all figure out. All of these are fairly obvious, but their common thread is that they can be consequential in ways that are well known but not yet fully explored. The common thread is competition. All organisms compete with each other, both within and between species, for resources and sustenance, including food, shelter, etc. This is true for fungi and single-celled organisms as much for higher species. It's a well-known, universally accepted statement or law, if you prefer, and it permeates the behavior of all life forms, including, obviously, the human species. We do compete with each other. It can be stated as another evolutionary law. I call it the second evolutionary law. All living things compete for their existence with all other living things. What about the role of cooperation? Does natural selection operate by competition alone? Cooperation, such as symbiosis and other mutually beneficial relationships between organisms of both the same and the same and different species, exists. There's no doubt that it's a factor. But what's its role? We can begin by looking at what eventually happened to Luca, the single-celled organism at the beginning. For well over 1 billion years, Luca and its descendants remained single-cell prokaryotes, duplicating themselves over and over and over. But evolution was not static during this time, but it was very slow. And this is because there was no mating. They just duplicate themselves. There was no male or female. But they eventually graduated to eukaryotes instead of prokaryotes. Single cells with a nucleus housing the DNA. And then they did couple and exchange DNA. And this was the engine that drove a lot of subsequent evolution. Because the product of you could call it mating. At the time, it wasn't male and female, but nevertheless, the offspring was a combination of two forms that existed before. And let's see. Oh, I jumped over quite a bit. That's great. Okay. So what happened in that case is that the first step in evolution was to become the development of male and female, and also to divide into the categories of plants, animals, and fungi, starting as early as 1.5 billion years ago. With plants consuming carbon dioxide and expelling oxygen, and animals and fungi consuming oxygen and expelling carbon dioxide. Even more significant, eukaryote cells began to cluster in ways where some could specialize in certain functions, such as digestion and protection that served other members of the cluster and vice versa. These colonies of cells with specialized functions exist today in organisms like the Portuguese man-o-war. It's not really a single organism. It's a cluster of organisms that cooperate with each other. And they bear some resemblance to colonies of insects like ants, termites, or bees, which function sort of like a single organism, but they consist of separate organisms. In any case, these clusters of eukaryotes can be considered early examples of cooperation. And these first cooperative groups of eukaryotes eventually evolved into the first multicelled organisms, both plants and animals. Now, there's no question that both competition and cooperation are inherent in all life forms on Earth, and that the origin of cooperation may be said to begin with the transition from prokaryotes to eukaryotes some 2 billion years ago. It's no wonder that they're both part of our DNA, so to speak. But I would argue that competition is, in fact, the only driving force in evolution. Why? Let me begin with a reductionist argument. Let us suppose that an organism exists that does not compete for its existence against organisms that do compete, with no motivation to defend itself against other organisms. How fast would it simply cease to exist? But if that is self-evident, how can cooperation exist at all? The answer is that cooperation confers an advantage to the organisms that engage in it. It was true for the early eukaryotes, and it's true for social alliances today, from wolf packs to human nations to beehives. But what is the nature of the advantage that cooperation confers upon the organisms that engage in it? The simple answer is that it enhances the ability to compete. It enhances the ability to compete. I lost my place. So, yeah, no, I can't. Ungulates form herds. Why? For protection. Nations form alliances for the same reasons. Criminals form gangs. Wolves form packs. Fish form schools. Bees form hives. Eukaryotes form colonies, and eventually multicelled organisms. But the purpose is always the same: to compete more effectively, to survive, and to pass one's genes to one's offspring. Cooperation is a means of competition, not an alternative to it, as far as natural selection is concerned. Life does not compete in order to cooperate. It cooperates in order to compete. And this may be stated as the third evolutionary law. All living things cooperate in varying degrees with each other for mutual advantage over other living things. Obviously, none of this is directly relevant to questions of morality, ethics, justice, or religion. Right or wrong, as well as good and bad, are questions which must be answered in a different type of discussion. The analysis that's presented here is devoted to what is or is not with respect to evolution and where it's leading the human species, life on Earth, and potentially life throughout the universe. I'm not addressing the question of what should or should not be, but it always helps to start with what we know in order to look at the effects and consequences. So now we come to the question of the human species and its evolution. We know that evolution has led life in many different directions during its long history on Earth. It began in the sea, migrated onto land, and eventually into the air as well. It has developed life forms that generate poison and perfume, change color at will, grow horns, fangs, and armor, and many other means and strategies for defending themselves, gaining advantage over other organisms, and propagating themselves. Evolution can be a very powerful process. We are nevertheless at a particularly momentous juncture in the history of evolution. I refer not so much to the development of the human species per se, as to the development of technology in the hands of the human species. Humans are, of course, the primary and almost exclusive agent of technology on Earth, and they're exceptional. We tend to think of intelligence as the primary reason for the ascendance of the human species. But we know that other species possess intelligence as well, including cetaceans, corvids, elephants, and cephalopods. And we can't be sure about the power of their intelligence, their linguistic abilities, and their abilities to function in organized groups, their intelligence and communication skills, as well as their social organization and life cycles may be so different that it can be hard to gauge their capabilities. But the octopus is the only other intelligent organism that possesses anything like this, our hands. The dolphins don't have it. The orcas don't have it, and so forth. Our ability to fashion with our hands new and artificial objects and machines, and to harness energy, i.e. technology, is unique. We are clearly the first technological species on this planet. It's central to our existence. That's why I prefer to emphasize the contribution of technology rather than brain development or intelligence toward the age in which we find ourselves. Let's remember that our brains are essentially the same as they were tens of thousands of years ago. The last major change was the development of human language, which required some rewiring of the brain, but not a lot. Because it had already proceeded in that direction. Current estimates are that the capacity for modern language may not be much older than 100,000 years. On the other hand, although it had predecessors, but real language as we know it. On the other hand, tool making is millions of years old. Neither tool making nor intelligence nor language nor even hands are unique to the human species, but the convergence of them is unique to us. And clearly these capabilities have fed off each other in a systematic way, even if none of them has resulted in major physical changes in our species. Some of this can be inferred in the growth and spread of human population, especially during the last 60,000 years or so. Equally astonishing has been the parallel and roughly simultaneous development of agriculture, urban architecture, and written languages, even in the Americas. Why did it all occur at the same time all over Earth when they were not in communication with each other? The reasons for this are not likely to be organic changes, that is, bodily changes, since we are essentially the same organism everywhere on Earth. The process and convergence appear to be largely self-driving once all the elements are in place. Perhaps when human settlements reach a critical size that creates a level of interaction that is in some ways exponential. That may be part of it. Also, that it might be due to the end of the ice ages, for example. I mean, it's a convergence of things. The process has now brought about the age of technology, which is accelerating at breakneck speed. How old is the Industrial Revolution? It really goes back only about 200 years. I mean, that's a blip in the geological time scale. But look where it's brought us. It challenges our efforts to keep up with and adapt to it. And our participation in the age of technology might not seem like much more than mere cogs in a system controlled by algorithms, technical managers, and organizations like Cambridge Analytica, who discovered that humans could be controlled to a significant degree through their electronic devices. You might want to ask me if you're not familiar with that, because that's what they discovered, and it's being used right now. The onset of the age may have begun with the first stone tools of hominids millions of years ago, but today it's progressed. I have to take questions afterwards. I got to make sure I finish this. The onset of the age may have begun, but it's progressed to where technology increasingly drives itself, with humans as the pollinators of developments such as AI, artificial life forms, and exploration of both the farthest and innermost reaches of the universe. We're often unprepared for the consequences. Most of us try to keep up, but it requires increasing vigilance to stay ahead. So that we don't become mere fuel in the vast machinery that is technology today. Think about your interaction with your smartphone. Who's controlling whom? Perhaps most of this is the inevitable result of the convergence of forces that formed our species and its societal dynamics. Nevertheless, it's in our interest to try to understand what is happening to our species and our planet and beyond. This is a unique time in the history of life on Earth, and it's due to the evolution of our species and its capabilities. Intelligent species existed in the distant past, especially among dinosaurs, intelligent dinosaurs. But while we have found their remains, we have never found any signs of civilizations or technologies that were produced by them, and we surely would have if they existed. If we can find one-celled creatures of 4.2 billion years ago, we're going to find that technology if it existed. Apparently, the convergence of developments that resulted in a species capable of creating a technological society has never existed on Earth until now. Similarly, we have no confirmed signs of technology on other worlds, either on our planet or on the others that we've investigated thus far. At most, we have speculation about unexplained phenomena that remain unexplained, which has been true since the beginning of time. But we have no objects on Earth that could not have been produced on Earth, whereas we have transported Earth-made objects, artifacts, to other bodies in our solar system, which could not have been produced on those bodies. Where is the space junk from extraterrestrial civilizations? Where is it? Where's the space junk? A similar question was famously asked by nuclear physicist Enrico Fermi in 1950 at a gathering of his fellow scientists. After some debate about life on other planets, they concluded that it must exist because there's nothing particularly unique about Earth. Planets with life may be rare, but there's so many planets in the universe that ours cannot be the only one to produce life. Even 1 in a million allows for a vast number. Furthermore, even though it took Earth more than 4 billion years to create its first technological species capable of interplanetary and potentially interstellar travel, there's no reason to think that we are necessarily the first in line, much less the only one. In fact, the odds are hugely against this being the case. This is the point at which Fermi asked his famous question known as the Fermi paradox. Then where are they? Okay. This is more than an idle question. It's a troubling mystery, and it refers to an uncomfortable fact that deserves an answer. Why is there no evidence of any contact with extraterrestrial civilizations? I mean, there's speculation, as I said, but that's all. Why would such civilizations not have left their traces on our planet? Even if aliens found our planet not worth very much of their time, how much more interesting are the moon and Mars where we left our space junk? It's simply inconceivable that Earth would not have been visited, nor that we are the very first to exist in all the universe. The answer to Fermi's question may help give us an idea about where we are headed. And I think it's possible to do that. What worries me is, I apologize if the answer is not to your liking. It's not to mine either. What worries me is that there may be a law of evolution that has the effect of blocking technological species from developing beyond a certain point. That a technological species hits a ceiling above which it cannot rise, and that this law is the same everywhere in the universe because the laws of evolution operate the same throughout the universe as do the laws of physics, for example. If we could pass that point, we could make contact with other technological species from other planets. But the available evidence points to the conclusion that no species anywhere in the universe develops beyond that point. Does it have anything to do with competition being the prime mechanism behind natural selection and cooperation secondary? I don't know, but the idea that human nature is fundamentally different from the nature of all other life seems flawed and unrealistic to me. We're not that different. The laws of the universe are universal. Hollywood is full of films like Dr. Strangelove and Don't Look Up. I hope you've seen Don't Look Up. About apocalyptic and post-apocalyptic visions of the world. We all agree that they have a plausible basis because we know the power of existing weaponry and the potential to use it, as well as the weakness of human will. Our species is entirely capable of wreaking terrible destruction on our planet and destroying many of its species, including our own. In fact, a significant number of species already trace their extinction to human activity. Did technological species on other planets and star systems meet the same fate? Is there a law of nature and evolution that dictates that when a technological species reaches a certain point of development, it destroys itself? or sets itself so far back in development that it requires a long, arduous crawl to recover, at which time it once again hits its evolutionary ceiling. Perhaps we should take Hollywood more seriously. We certainly have the means to accomplish such an apocalyptic outcome. Nuclear war, climate change, biological warfare, such as experimental disease strains, chemical warfare, even artificial intelligence. If extraterrestrial civilizations have the same experience, this would certainly explain the absence of contact from or with them. But is it a law of evolution? I believe that a strong case can be made that it is, that it's built into the nature of life and the primary mechanism of natural selection as a corollary to evolutionary law 2, that all living things compete for their existence with all other living things. I therefore propose evolutionary law number 4 as follows. When a technological species, of which we know of only one, achieves the capability of self-destruction, its primary competitive drive sooner or later causes the exercise of this capability. Is an evolutionary ceiling hanging over our heads like a sword of Damocles? Do natural laws dictate that sooner or later we will bring catastrophe upon ourselves? If so, how close are we to that point? In the last 2 million years, have we ever invented a weapon that we have not used? The answer is no, we haven't. The spectacular and unprecedented changes through which we're now living appear to be accelerating geometrically and perhaps exponentially. Compared to the period of existence on life on Earth, the age of technology is no more than a split second, but its acceleration is without constraint. So my analysis is to suggest that there may in fact be a limit, an unplanned direction in which we may be headed and which may be directed by universal laws that we as yet understand poorly. Let me ask 6 questions for which I do not have answers, but which may illustrate the problem. 1, how likely is it that we will stop inventing new means of destroying ourselves, either in part or in whole, whether deliberately or not? 2, how likely is it that all the nations of the world will agree to destroy all technology that endangers our entire species? 3, how likely is it that we will live with the tools of our own destruction for the indefinite future without using them either by accident or on purpose? 4, if we agree to measures that will make us safe, how long will all the nations of the world abide by them with no Samson option that destroys everyone? 5, if we achieve the previous objectives, how likely is it that we will manage to keep the means of destruction out of the hands of actors that are not party to the agreements? 6, if we manage to adhere to the previous 5 and to control measures for 10 years, how much longer will we be able to do so? Another 10 years? Another 50 years? Another 100 years? Another 1,000? 10,000? 100,000? Will we really keep all of these weapons under control indefinitely? We have no experience with this point in our evolutionary history. Nothing to compare it to. If or when we hit the evolutionary ceiling, what will it look like? Will we destroy all life on Earth? Will we destroy all human life plus some other species? Will we destroy ourselves only to the point of leaving enough population to rebuild slowly? In the absence of technological tools to which we've become accustomed? If we succeed in rebuilding, will we find ourselves hitting the same evolutionary ceiling as before? In that case, will the result be as bad or better or worse than the first time? Or is it totally unpredictable? As I said, we have nothing to guide us. This is the first time in our planet's history, and possibly the last, to face this situation. We also have, unfortunately, no guide from the rest of the galaxy or universe, or at least not yet. I don't know about you, but I would find it very comforting to receive visitors from other planets telling and showing us that there's another option and another explanation for Fermi's paradox.
Thank you, Paul. Those some challenging questions there, some challenging ideas. So anyone who would like to ask a question, write it down in your card. And I have a bunch of questions already, which, yeah, we're going to start with those, the ones that I have. So let me see. Actually, I have the wrong glasses on. Wow, we got so many questions. All right. Let's see. I'm just going to, maybe I'll do it. Let's see. Well, let me see here. The first question we got was, okay. I've been asking the question, are Homo sapiens sapien evolving? This person wrote. Since 1983, when I took classes from Stephen Jay Gould, a neo-Darwinist. I appreciate your concepts such as the convergence of situations and technology. If you are familiar with Gould's punctuated equilibrium concept, would you say that humans are in a time of great evolutionary change?
It's really hard to predict such evolutionary change. But there is some evidence that natural selection is operating on humans today. Because, as I mentioned, the family tree of humans gets pruned in various points, as some people have offspring and some people don't. And so that is driving change, mostly, I would say, at the present time, not in the punctuated manner that Gould describes, but more, it's more gradual. But that could always change according to circumstances, such as catastrophic war. I mean, if we have a situation where most of humanity is destroyed, then the section of humanity that survives and propagates will introduce a faster and punctuated change.
Okay, so there's a group of questions which I'll get to, which are more, I guess in a sense challenging. But I'll get to that in a minute. Your speculations, put it that way. Here, this one is a different question. It says, please say something about first father, the male whose chromosome is in all males today. You see.
Yeah, that's basically the same thing as with the first. It's not the first woman. These are this is the one man to whom we can all trace our ancestry. There were other men before him, and there were other women before the woman to whom we all trace ancestry and share DNA. But those are branches of the human tree that didn't propagate beyond that. So that's why. And the male is probably thousands of years in a different time from the female. which reflects the same principle. So, yeah, I mean, but there's nothing special about either one of them. They are simply the grandmother of the grandmother and the grandfather of the grandfather and so on. I mean, that's and the other their sisters and brothers created other lines that died out. That's all.
Okay, well, okay. All right, here's another question. It's okay. Can we consider war as a natural process in order to keep the population in check? For example, our population of 9 billion would be X times greater had it not been for war.
Well, I don't think of war as a means of keeping the population in check, and I don't think it ever was. I think it is an outcome of the fact that evolution is driven by competition, and that's an extreme form of that type of competition. But it happens with other species, just that those other species don't have the means of killing millions of their kind. I mean, lions, for example, will destroy an entire one pride of lion will destroy the another entire pride of lions to propagate their DNA, so to speak. But yeah, I think war is just an extreme form of that.
Okay, so here's another question, a related question, but more contemporary and particular. What do you think of my projected idea that Donald Trump will use a nuclear bomb or bombs to distract people from the Epstein case, setting off nuclear war and destroying human life in order to stay out of jail, I guess. Yeah, okay.
Hey, that's as good a theory as any, as in my opinion. I mean, if it's going to happen, the reason for its happening, the cause of its happening, has got to be really stupid, and that's as good as any.
Okay, here's a question that I guess sort of challenges this idea that because we don't have evidence of life on other planets and stuff, the way you were suggesting. If Einstein's conclusion that the limits of speed of travel are the limits of light, wouldn't that explain the lack of evidence of life in other star systems given the distances between them?
That's definitely one explanation, but I find it hard to imagine that our species is going to allow it to stop us. I have a feeling that there will be volunteers willing to go, and that there will be means of sending them those distances, even though they might or might not have a means of communicating, except possibly with quantum forms of communication that are instantaneously available. But that would be they're in the process of developing those right now, and those could transcend light speed because they have no speed at all.
All right, here's another one that sort of challenges, I guess, your thesis. Humans are both competitive and cooperative. Is it possible that our competitive stage, our social competitive stage, capitalism, economically might give rise, because of its problems, to a cooperative system, socialism or communism, in order to overcome the obstacles that presently blocks our path to the future development, i.e. capitalism?
Well, I'm not going to say that anything is impossible, but it would be contrary to the kind of laws that appear to be part of our nature. That's, I think it would be unnatural. Can we overcome our nature? Can we overcome the driving force in evolution? Maybe, but it hasn't happened yet. So, but we can always hope.
I'm not sure this is speaking to the same thing. Do you think that if a new government took control of all the technology, I guess, computers and so on, they could control the whole system of the country, all the countries on the world? Something like that.
I don't accept that the premise is even possible for one country to control all of the world. And also, you know, all of the when we imagine other civilizations from other planets coming, why do we always assume that they are coming from unified planets that all where everybody accepts the same thing? Why wouldn't they have as much diversity on their planet as we have on ours?
Okay. All right. Here's another one. Can you speculate on a planet of women in the presence of control and competition? The planet of women in control and the presence of competition versus cooperation. Is that pretty clear? Yeah.
I would be cautious about 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 saying that women are immune to competition. Has anybody ever lived in a sorority house? I mean, this idea, it has more to do with the difference that men typically have more power. But there are species where the female is definitely the dominant partner. And I don't see any lessening of competition in those other species. So it's nice to think of things like that. But as I said, if you had a species that did not compete and preferred to cooperate, then a species which does prefer to compete will destroy that species.
Okay, here's a question particular to AI. So this person's asking, does AI sometimes give researchers the answer that AI believes the researcher wants?
AI always gives the answer that it believes. It always asks you, did I give you what you were looking for? You know, I mean, basically it boils down to that. But the idea of tailoring the answer so that it diverges from the truth, that's actually beginning to happen to a certain extent. And AI is not always, 100% accurate. So anything is possible. I don't know. We're at the beginning of AI, and we'll see what happens with that.
Okay, so here's a question related to finding some evidence of life in other parts of the universe. NASA announced that they discovered chemicals of ancient life on Mars. Do you think society, I assume they're talking about society here, will react, or how do you think society will react when or if technology signatures are discovered around other planets, including in distant stars?
They'll blast them to smithereens. No, no. I think they'll be interested and to explore that. But we don't have to find it just on other planets. It would be nice to find such things on outside extraterrestrial things. But but also here on Earth, we have corvids and even orcas use tools, and other species use tools, and they have that's a form of technology. So that's not the beginning, but we're the first species not to use technology necessarily per se, but where it dominates our existence, where technology dominates our existence. In fact, it'd be hard to imagine. It's very difficult for us to and go live like our ancestors 500,000 years ago did. So, yeah.
So this is a very abbreviated question, but I think I understand what it's getting at. It says, so it's not capitalism? I think a lot of us have that question.
Yeah.
I certainly do.
Well, I'm not a fan of capitalism, and many excuses are made for it by capitalists. But I also don't think that, I hate to really put too much hope in any one economic or social system. I don't don't consider myself a socialist, but if you look at, I think it was 13 articles that I published in Dissident Voice, you'll see that it describes socialist measures that I thought could practically be implemented in the United States to essentially convert it into a socialist society and economy, let's say a more compassionate society. And I did that without ever mentioning Marxism. So I like to think of the practical side. I don't do things because it adheres to a theory. I think it makes more sense to question every part of every theory and do what makes sense at the time for a particular situation. That's my take on it.
Does anybody else have any other questions that they want to pass forward here? Oh, somebody's writing one. Okay, I was at an event yesterday in Bakersfield, and a young man got up and made a very long impassioned presentation about borders. And, we know historically that Europeans basically drew 40% of the borders on the planet. Capitalism arose, and then colonialism, and has divided the world and created this incredibly competitive. Isn't it possible that now we kind of understand each other, where technology is bringing us together in a certain sense, right? We now understand each other, or we can communicate with each other all over the planet. Isn't it possible that we can overcome the divisions that colonialism has bestowed to us and actually create a world society, not without conflict, but certainly without the kind of fatal conflicts that we're in the midst of right now?
I think the last time that we had a world society was 900,000 years ago, when there were 1,280 human beings on the face of the planet. I don't think increasing the population and the ability to communicate is going to bring us together, except in a superficial sense. Because I think of the places where I've lived and where I've learned the language. I speak more or less 4 or 5, maybe 5.5 languages. And I've lived in all these places. And honestly, if you haven't lived in a place, and I'm sure all of you or most of you have this similar experience, you are not going to You've spoken to people that you know, and they don't understand. They're nice people, they're generous people, everything, but they don't understand, and they get their information from the wrong sources. What I talked about with Cambridge Analytica is the way, for example, the information media and the mass media in the US manipulate what we hear, what we understand, and their purpose is to divide us, not to unite us. And the best way to know what's going on is to go there and talk to the people and find it that there's not much difference between ourselves, and that nobody back home understands what's happening here. But I don't see that changing, because we're a hierarchical structure, and we're not going to, I don't see human society changing in such a way that we're ready to all participate in the management administration of our society to the same degree, because that's what it's going to take for us to have an egalitarian society. Some people don't want to be bothered with that. They want to be left alone and to pursue their goals in life that have nothing to do with making decisions for the whole society and all that. You can't get past that. We're going to have some kind of division of labor, and part of that division of labor is going to be for there to be a management and an administration, and those who don't want to be bothered. My son is one of those. My older son. He just wants to get on with his career and his life and all this. He may run into a situation where he loses his job and catastrophe happens and he loses his fortune and I don't know what. And then he'll be forced to think about it. But there's no reason why everybody should have to think about it. So I'm not optimistic. Human existence has fundamentally had the same faults and good qualities and compensations for its entire existence. I don't. There are differences in style and in types of advantages and disadvantages, but humans are humans. And what you had 5,000 years ago is essentially what you've got today, and vice versa. So we got to make the best of it, that's all.
I'm just curious, have you ever read a book called The Dawn of Everything? Okay, all right. I'll make a mention of that in a second. But okay, so here's another question. If I understand your premise, technology and weaponry advances cause destruction of civilizations all over the universe. Here on Earth, should we appreciate and celebrate the peacemakers who risk their own safety for the rights of others?
There's no question about that. I was going to say something about what I just said before. Yes, Voltaire. How many of you have read Candide? Fair number. At the end of it, after Voltaire shows how horrible the human society is, he ends by the hero and the heroine, I forget which one says it, il faut cultiver nos jardins. We have to cultivate our gardens. That's what we have to do. And that I think, for me, that's the answer. We have to take care of our corner of the universe. And if we do that, and everybody else does it, I think it'll be fine. But um, not everybody does that, and not everybody understands how to do it. I've been trying to improve myself for the last 79 years and change. And I intend to keep on doing that for the rest of the time that I'm here, another 80 years. So,
Yeah, we're about the same age. Okay, so I mentioned the book, The Dawn of Everything, and it's written by archaeologists doing a survey of what archaeology and anthropology has sort of discovered in the last decade or so, or maybe more than that. And their conclusion is that there's been a lot of civilizations in this world that have come up with all kinds of solutions and innovations, that this is not the only society that humans have had or is possible for humans. So that's their argument. They, again, that 650-page book, arguing, examining, and saying that there are many that didn't leave a trace because of they didn't have writing or what have you, or written or ways to record their thoughts. But there's evidence in the structures of their cities and places where they lived that indicate that they were more egalitarian. So their argument is that human beings are flexible and capable of many different kinds of societies, not just competitive ones. So anyway, I just want to throw that out there. I was, we actually had a forum here months and months ago where I was trying to present that, and we had some conversation about it. But I really appreciate you coming here and bringing these ideas. You're going to come back and speak more, but I do appreciate this kind of conversation because I think it's really important. But and I just wanted one other question. When Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement and the women's movement and that whole era of the 1960s was in full bloom, it became a very popular idea that the arc of justice is long, but it bends. No, the arc of humanity is long, but it bends towards justice. Something like that. I may be not quoting it correctly, but I think it came out of the positiveness of the moment, historical moment. Is it possible that your kind of bleak prediction for us is more a result of the kind of Trumpian madness that we're presently involved in right now that makes things look more bleak than they need to be?
Yeah, the arc of history bends towards justice, but I'm not sure I share that optimism. I think justice on balance remains roughly the same in all periods of history. It changes temporarily. By temporarily, it could be hundreds of years in certain locations. And I would be cautious about the kind of generalization that ascribes to a society that a past civilization that can no longer speak for itself, to ascribe what the attributes it held. But yeah, the adaptability of human beings is legend, but the ability to adapt the entire human race would be surprising, let's say. And I fall back on what I said earlier about if you have a species that is not aggressive and cooperates with each other and um, and take care of each other and is kind to each other almost invariably, then it's going to be swallowed by some other species that doesn't feel the same way. That's basically it.
Does anybody want to come up here and say anything? You're certainly welcome to do that if you have a comment you'd like to make, or if you have another question to ask. Anne, did you have something you want to say? Here, come over here. Say,
But um, um, I don't know what to say except my motivation, my passion to do something in the present moment has been affected by this talk. And I mean, when you bring in science, I wasn't here in the beginning, so I really don't know very much about what you said in the beginning, but we're obviously at a turning point. And we have been for a long time, but right now it's really escalating, and the whole thing of no technology. I don't know. I hope I can recover some passion and some hope for our species, for all of us on this planet, and not just our species, all species. That's all.
yeah, I sort of echo, I kind of believe that. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate your long history of study and consideration of these really important ideas and bringing them here. It's important for us to have these kind of conversations. I just wanted to, so we should give Paul an applaud for the applause. Okay. I do need to announce that next Sunday, which is already in October, my goodness, October 5th at 9 a.m., the UUSF and Women's Rights Group will present Alicia Maldonado, Supporting Survivors of Sexual Assault. Um, and so it'll be starting at 9:30 like we usually do. Doors will open at 9 o'clock for a light breakfast and all that.